Hey everyone, welcome to our channel. Today we are going to be doing a faux wood grain look, kind of a Restoration Hardware Pottery Barn dupe on this dresser. So what we have done is we have already painted it in the color White Dove. That's going to be our base color, and we're going to show you how we do a faux wood grain look onto this piece. And we will show you step by step, and all the products we use will be listed in the comments below. Let's go.
Starting off, we have a rag, some extender, some Van Dyke brown glaze by General Finishes, and some brushes with all different textures and widths. And we're just going to apply a liberal coat of General Finishes Van Dyke brown glaze. We're going to be working in small sections, so basically just a little bit longer than the 4-inch foam brush that I'm working with currently. You want it to be consistent throughout your whole strip that you're working with, and it is going to be drying pretty quickly, but you can add some of that extender into it to give you a little bit more working time. And again, we're working in small sections. This is a very important step. We are going to take a rag that has some extender on it, and we are going to be using it as our wipe rag. So starting off with a 4-inch regular paintbrush that you would use on a wall, we are going to be kind of feathering it out. Our main goal is to be getting the product off of the dresser, and every couple passes we're going to be wiping it off onto that extender rag. This is good to not only get the product off of the paintbrush, but also to get some of the extender onto the paintbrush so that when you're feathering this out, it gives you a little bit more working time. After we're done feathering it out, we're going to do one long sweep across the top of the dresser to give a nice consistent look so you don't see a bunch of feathering motions on the dresser. And if you've noticed, I have now switched on to the 4-inch chip brush. This is going to give it a more rustic look because it has coarser bristles. I've seen some people using a broom head. That's just a little too rustic for me, and I find that it's too stiff for me to work with. I find that the chip brushes give me a little bit more bend and allow me to work better and have more control over the strokes that I'm putting in. Continuing on to the next section, we sped this up just a little bit, and you will notice that we are overlapping just slightly in order that we can blend it a little bit better so you don't see a line from one section to another. And going in feathering out with the regular paintbrush, and then we will do one stroke all the way across to get a nice clean line. Dab it off with the extender rag and going back again, and then going with the chip brush, feathering it out and giving it the more rustic look. I find that the chip brush is really what ties it all together between the two areas and really helps to blend it more. And it's the same process. Feather it out a little bit, wipe it onto the extender rag, and then do one nice stroke all the way across. Make sure that you do a straight line and you avoid going into like a rainbow type pattern that sometimes happens when you're just standing in the middle of the dresser and moving your hand across. Kind of stand at one end and walk it to the other end so that you avoid using like a rainbow motion, which will show up on your dresser. Then it is the last section. I remember being really nervous that I was going to have a dark line, but when I got in with the chip brush and I blended it in, that line went away and crisis was averted. I always get so nervous when I do these dressers, and usually it all ends up working fine in the end. For the next part, we are going in with a 1-inch foam brush. We are going right to left, kind of always going like with the grain. So on the top of the dresser, we went the opposite way, just kind of whatever way the grain would go. If this was a real wood dresser, is how we're going to replicate it. And since I don't have a brush that is about 1 inch, I'm just using the foam brush, and it worked really well. I just used it the same way, where I am basically trying to get all of the excess glaze off and wiping it off on my wipe rag with the extender on in between. And after I do that, I'm going in with a smaller chip brush. The key here is to make sure that you don't get onto the top of the dresser that you just finished. If anything, you want to position your brush so that most of the bristles are headed down so that you don't accidentally go the opposite way on the top of the dresser that you just finished. Now we're going to speed up and we're going to show you how it is on the front of the dresser. This is going along the grain line that the dresser was before, so it's not quite as imperative that we get it perfect and not get it on top of the dresser, but we're still going to try to avoid that. Now onto the side, you can see the trim piece from the top and the bottom are both going right to left, because that's how it would be on a normal dresser. And I'm going in with the 1-inch brush and using it and just getting all the excess glaze off, then going in with the chip brush. And I'm going to do the same on that bottom little trim piece that you see, just really kind of paying attention to how the wood grain would go on a normal dresser. You're going to hear me say that a lot, but you kind of have to map it out before you start going with it. One thing that I will say is that we are going in with 2 other colors. We're going to go with a white and a gray glaze next, and this is going to soften up any of the harsh lines. So if you're doing this and you think that this is not it's more of a harsh finish, don't worry. When we put in some white and gray glaze, we are going to really soften this up and get that Pottery Barn look. Now moving on to the center, you will notice this is sped up, but I'm putting most of the glaze on in the middle, and then I'm going to slowly work it into the edges and the corners. This is because I don't want all of that excess glaze to accumulate there, because it is very hard to get a clean look and try to spread it out and make it look very consistent throughout the whole piece. Same with the edges. Since the top is going a different direction from where I'm working, I'm being very careful not to let my new glaze get onto the area that I have already finished and that is already drying, because that is going to be very hard to get off. I had to be very careful when I got up to the top over there. I did take a little artist brush and just slowly started getting all the glaze off of the edge, and I just kind of pushed it up and then used my 1-inch foam brush to move it around a little bit. And with the chip brush, I am going to feather out any of the excess area, and this is where all the magic happened, and this was the best tool that I had to get all of that glaze out and to create a clean and consistent look, because with a regular paintbrush or the foam paintbrush, all of that glaze collects in there and just works more to coat it, and the chip brush works more to get it off and move it around. I did something a little bit different on this column because it had like a little inlay to it, and I used an artist brush and then a little fan brush as my 2 brushes for this small little divot beside the column and the little detail that we had. I will say that these finishes are very fun, but they're very time consuming, and if from a business type of standpoint, I will say this is not the most profitable finish that we do. Probably the most profitable thing that we do is an all paint job, because it takes the least amount of time and least amount of product, and it always sells very well. But these finishes are just so fun, and it's a great way to showcase your talent to potential custom work clients. Another key thing to note here is to get the inside of the drawer, like on the frame and on the base of the frame, so that when you close the drawer, you don't see white underneath the drawer. So you have to make sure that you get inside the drawer, as well as the tops and the sides of the drawers that are going in. One thing I will say, I made a big mistake on this. I only did half of the base on the right side. If I was doing this again, I would for sure have done the base all together from one side of the drawers to the other side of the drawers instead of doing half the dresser, because this was very hard to blend. I actually had to go in with a little piece of sandpaper and kind of sand off a little bit of the finish so that I could redo and blend it all together. It was a huge mistake. Learn from my mistakes and don't make the same mistake. Another thing that I like to do is I take the drawers out when I do the frame, but I like to put the drawer in when I paint the drawer, because I want to keep an eye on it to make sure that I'm staying consistent with the color and the amount of brush strokes that I put into it, to make sure that I'm getting a clean and consistent look from one drawer to the next and that they all look the same. We really prefer to do this look with dressers with clean lines and not a lot of detail, very simple. And even though this is a curved dresser, the lines are still pretty clean. There's not a lot of boxes or detail to it because that really makes it look busy, and that takes away from the simplicity of the Pottery Barn look. As I said that, there is a box on the top drawers, and I just used my 1-inch brush to kind of go around it and over it, and I just had to be very careful on feathering it out, and I used a small artist brush to get all of the excess out of those tiny little corners. And of course, this is the same thing I did on the other side. The top piece is going one way, the major part of the side is going the up and down, and then the bottom piece is going from left to right again. And I'm putting the excess into the middle, just kind of brushing it up from the bottom into the middle, and then I'm taking it and wiping it off on my rag, and then I'm going in to feather it out and just make it look very consistent. This is just a sped up look at the process. As you can see, it's looking good. I'm actually pretty happy with this look so far. If only it went this fast, then it would be amazing. Kind of feels like a little Mary Poppins look when now we're looking back at it and recording it. Now that we are done with the very first layer of glaze, this is the one that takes the longest amount of time. This is what it looks like. It looks a little bit too rustic, but that's okay because we're going to stick with the process, and we are going to add in some white and gray glaze to it to soften it up and lighten the color, and it's going to look great. So we're using Winter White by General Finishes and Smoky Gray by General Finishes, and of course the star is the extender on the rag. We're going to wipe it off, and we always go on the side of lighter to begin with, and I had too much extender on my rag. It wasn't working, so I had to put more paint, pour more glaze onto the brush, and you can kind of see as we zoomed in that it's getting on the dresser now and it's softening the look up a little bit. We're going to speed up the process so that you can see in a time lapse how much of a difference it makes, and you can kind of see how it softens up from looking a little bit more rustic to a much smoother finish. Of course, if you like the more rustic look, you can just stop here and seal it, but this is the way that we are going with this. And there's the line from one side to the other where you can see that I have done it and where I haven't, and I am going to continue on to the other side of the dresser. You can see how I am doing this in the background is I took a piece of cardboard and I'm just really getting all of the excess off. This is part of the dry brushing process. So it is very different from the first step of the glaze where you're trying to do a pretty liberal coat throughout the whole thing. With this glaze, on the white glaze, we are dry brushing, which means that it goes fast. We're doing this a lot faster, but we are using a lot less product. Less is more. You can always build, but it is hard to remove once you put it on. One thing I love about this time lapse is that you can see it going onto the dresser from one side of the dresser to the other, how much softer it looks, and that is the look that we are going for. It is also giving us a lighter look, which is another thing that we are looking for in the Pottery Barn finish, is for a lighter look. Now we are going in with the gray glaze, and this one just went on a whole lot more pigmented than the white glaze. So I actually put some extender onto a rag, and after I did it, I kind of wiped it all back to blend it in because it was kind of grouping in areas that I didn't like, and so the extender on the rag really kind of blended it all together, which you can see here. You can see that it's heavier in some areas, but once you wipe it with the extender rag, it blended it all so well together. And I love looking from the left to the right and seeing it transform. It is definitely more of the color that we are looking for. I will say that probably adding in more colors to your finish is the secret component into making this such a unique and beautiful finish. This is what it looks like after it was all staged. We added some ring pulls, and after we took this to the store, it sold within 24 hours. We got this dresser at a thrift store and we spent $70 on it, and we sold it for $550, making our profit $480. That is another look at the Pottery Barn finish. Like and subscribe for more.